And look, I know many of you are going to disagree with what I'm about to say here, but think of it in the same way you would think about a friend with benefits. Like, looks fabulous and ticks all the boxes in the short term, but you'll always have this sneaking suspicion that there are some dramas bubbling underneath.
Now, a lot of people will tell you that these are the pinnacle of German engineering and that these engines are simply the best ever made. Well, I'm not here for that. I'm going to tell you the truth.
Well, all of that is instantly forgotten the minute you flex your right foot. So if you've been looking into buying a Mercedes-Benz of late, or maybe you've watched any of our recent Mercedes-Benz videos, you may have noticed a bit of a, let's say, an unfortunate trend forming. It seems that maybe Mercedes-Benz aren't keeping up their side of the deal. From the GLC to the GLA to the S-Class, even with the full-fat AMG models like the C63, owners have reported a range of quality and reliability concerns, and many of them are very disappointed, to say the least. This is supposed to be a premium brand, and have been banking on their over-engineered excellence for decades now. Should we believe the hype when it comes to the CLA, or do these things avoid all of the shortcomings of so many of their siblings? And should you ever consider buying a used one? Well, to answer all of those questions, we really need to talk about the bad news first with these, and that means talking about anything that has electricity running to it. Basically, before you buy one of these, just try everything and make sure it actually works. You'd like to think that chances are it will, but when you go through the owners groups and forums and talk to any Mercedes-Benz techs, you're going to see countless stories of things like power mirrors playing up or keyless or central locking issues. We wouldn't call them common as such, just more sort of sporadic issues. However, in saying that, there are some other electronic issues that popped up in the research so often, we do think they are a common concern. For example, there are a host of owners out there that have had problems just getting the boot to open, and they've tried every form, doing it manually, trying it with a key fob with the button inside, it just won't work. Even when they replace the battery or the fuses or do a reset within the car, it still doesn't work. The car has to go back to the dealership because it's just this mystery that takes multiple visits to the dealership to sort it out. Now look, this will be fine if the car is still under warranty and you have all of the time in the world and you don't actually need to access the boot. But if that's not the scenario, this is a pain in the ass. And the same goes for the windows, specifically the driver and passenger side windows. There are reports that these can drop differently, or sometimes they won't auto raise when the door is shut, even after multiple reset attempts. Unfortunately though, these electronic gremlins aren't isolated to the exterior. There are a bunch of reports with the interiors as well. For example, some of these will show phantom warnings. I'm not saying that there's a warning to tell you that there's a phantom close, that doesn't actually exist, but you'll get things like an engine light popping up, or a warning telling you that the coolant level is low, or maybe some safety warnings coming up, or the car telling you that you're going to run into something. But on further investigation, there's actually nothing wrong with the car at all. Although the AMG models, they do have an appetite for coolant. But look, annoyingly with these phantom warnings, this can mean that the car has to be booked in at the dealership to go and get it investigated. Then you take the car there, they clear the warnings and tell you nothing has gone wrong with the car at all, only for the warnings to come back, a week or two later. Bloody annoying. Or some of these warnings can pop up due to some stupid oversights in the production process. For example, the coolant warning light that can come up. Sometimes this can be due to the fact that there's a clip behind the bumper that is involved in the coolant system and it hasn't been attached properly from the factory, or maybe it's just a faulty sensor on its way out. But you've got to remember, these cars aren't that old. They shouldn't have these issues in the first place. Now look, we need to make something incredibly clear here. Obviously not every single CLA are going to suffer all of these problems. There are thousands and thousands of them out there that will never ever have an issue. Now next up, the sunroof. If this thing is even just the slightest bit out of alignment, it can throw a tantrum and just refuse to open and close. Good news here is adjusting the alignment isn't that big a deal. However, some owners have been forced to buy some spare parts for the sunroof to make it work properly again. If it's out of warranty, that's going to add up quickly. Also with these sunroofs, there are a handful of reports out there that they can leak water into the cabin. Not at all common, quite rare actually. But like any sunroof in any car, it is imperative that all the drainage channels are cleaned and cleared regularly. Actually, if you're looking at one of these and there's any signs that they haven't been cleared regularly, or when you ask the owner how often they clear them and they kind of look at you like a confused puppy, do not buy that car. Now, if the car you're looking at is wearing these utterly gorgeous black AMG wheels, just know that the black finish, it is known to chip quite easily. But here's the hot tip. tip. Don't go racing back to your Mercedes-Benz dealership to get this fixed because there's a good chance they're going to charge you a fortune. There are plenty of great independent wheel repairers out there that'll fix these up toot sweet. But on the non-AMG models with the run flat tyres, these things have been known to crack rims on our shitty Australian roads. Hot tip here is just avoid potholes or any of the heavy road acne that we have here because OEM replacement rims are bloody expensive. However, for the AMG owners out there, the adaptive suspension that many of these come fitted with is incredibly impressive and very clever when it's working properly, because some owners have had issues where it stops working correctly. Now, the good news here is it's generally fixed under warranty. However, that warranty is not going to be around forever, and when this stuff fails when it's out of warranty, again, bloody expensive. Also, it seems that the AMG brake pads seem to prioritise creating an immense amount of dust for the wheels as much as they do stopping the car. You're going to have to clean these wheels every 5 to 10 minutes. However, before you go racing out to buy genuine Mercedes parts to fix all of this stuff, do your homework on the owners groups and forums, because plenty have found that buying aftermarket parts can save you some money. They can outlast and outperform the original equipment. For the brake pads as well, you can get rid of this dust issue while not impacting the stopping power. Actually, no matter what you drive, for all the best aftermarket parts and accessories, hit the Automotive Superstore link down below. Plus, get on their website, type in your rego details, and it will display all the parts that are going to be best fitted for your car. They're mates of ours, check them out. The link's down there, bloody do it. But look, let's talk about positives with the exterior of the CLA. And the big one that comes up first is just the overall fit and finish and build quality. According to the owners that have owned both, these are dramatically better than the previous generation. Apparently the recently updated versions of these are even better again. In saying that though, the previous generation, they were not good for fit and finish and build quality. Even the badges could just fall off randomly. What does that tell you about Mercedes-Benz's attention to detail? Also, another positive, look at it. It's stunning. Now look, I've got to explain something here. Black does not translate well on camera at all. And look, we all know how gorgeous these are to look at, especially in this CLA45 S trim. Love it. I also love the V8 twin-turbo C63 sedan, but where that car looks like a general C-Class that's just been doing a heavy CrossFit workout to get all muscly, this looks like a C-Class sedan that has trimmed down and become all athletic for a triathlon. Also, that 2024 update barely changed the design of the car because, let's face it, Mercedes-Benz got it right from the start. And for those that don't know, the A-Class is basically the hatch version of this car. Also, and look, I know many of you are going to disagree with what I'm about to say here, but I love that the AMG models of these, they don't shout that there's something special. There's no stupid big wing or bits of plastic stuck on all over the place. It's one of those cars that to know it's something special, you need to know, you know? But you know what the interior is like? Think of it in the same way you would think about a friend with benefits. Like, it looks fabulous and ticks all the boxes in the short term, but when you start thinking long-term commitment, yeah, there's a chance that you might end up living together happily ever after. But you'll always have this sneaking suspicion that there are some dramas bubbling underneath. For example, across the range, plenty of owners have complained about just rattles and weird noises popping up from all through the interior, behind the dashboard, within the door cards, from all the pillars, even within the roof. It seems that while nearly everything you touch feels of just the highest quality, as long as you touch it lightly, and it obviously looks phenomenal in here, behind the surface, you just know that there's a lot of plastic going on. As the car ages, these plastics can become brittle, and that's why they make weird noises like squeaking and creaking and rattling. Also, plenty of owners have complained that any of this sort of satin metal finish or the chrome finishes, it started to sort of just flake off. And even in terms of the air conditioning vents, this plastic section here, it can just fall off. And also, this entire air vent section, it can get a bit wobbly, as can the aircon control panel down here. That's not great. Now, these cars feature some really cool interior ambient lighting that can be adjusted into like 64 colors or something. Very cool when it works. The problem is some owners have found it doesn't, or maybe one door doesn't work when the rest does. Also, some owners have found that when the door lights go out, so do all of the electronics in the door. Everything here can just stop working. I've got to say, but this is not a common issue at all. It's pretty rare, so you should be okay, hopefully. Then there are the seats, which I've got to say are spectacular to sit in. These things are near perfection. So supportive, but also really comfortable. Obviously, these are the AMG seats, but even the seats in the base models, super comfortable, loads of adjustment, and the overall ergonomics in the car, spot on. However, with these AMG seats, these can be guilty of issues where there's some plastic components inside the seat that can work themselves loose over time and they start squeaking and rattling. And according to the Mercedes-Benz tech that we spoke to, fixing this problem is a complete nightmare. Pray to God that if this occurs, it happens when the car is still covered under warranty. And again, we're sure the majority of owners out there are never going to experience any of these issues. However, after talking to Mercedes owners that have owned Mercs for 30 or even 40 years, they did make a point of saying that sense of premium quality that you used to get in the 1980s and 1990s just isn't there for Mercedes anymore, according to them. But then we get to the infotainment system. And look, this MBUX system, when it's working perfectly, is fantastic. It's so intuitive to use. The depth of what this thing can do is nuts. I doubt any owners are going to delve into more than 10 or 15% of what the capability is here. I think it is easily up there with the best systems out there. BMW's iDrive, superb, and the Genesis system, fantastic. This is close. Also, all of these come with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto as standard, and the 2024 update, CarPlay and Android Auto became wireless, and it also got a refresh to the interface and the graphics were improved. I don't know why they needed to do that though, because this is a pre-update car and this is utterly wonderful. It still looks great. It works perfectly in this one. It's excellent. Unfortunately though, quite a few owners haven't been as lucky as Albert with this car. See, even just a little bit of research will uncover reports about this entire system crashing, the screens going black, both screens, not just the infotainment one, or Apple CarPlay and Android Auto and Bluetooth just dropping out all the time. And in its defense, the post-update cars apparently have fixed these issues, but even then, in pre and post-update cars, some owners have found that when they put the car in reverse, the cameras don't display on the screens at all. You can tell they're there, but there's nothing on the screen. Now look, a lot of this stuff is often fixed by just restarting the car or restarting the infotainment system itself. However, other owners have found that they've had to give the entire car a software update. This can be done at the dealership or sometimes via the Mercedes-Me app, but then that raises a whole bunch of other concerns. Like the infotainment system, when Mercedes-Me is working perfectly, it's fantastic. You can start the car, you can operate a bunch of functions, and you can do software updates in the car. But the problem is, plenty of owners have reported connection issues with it, or sometimes it will display the wrong information. Like it will say that your car is due for a service or overdue for a service when that simply isn't the case. Sometimes the app just completely locks up and doesn't do anything at all, which makes it completely pointless in the first place. But unfortunately, some owners have found that when they're doing the software update for the infotainment system via the app, if there's a connection issue, it can just lock the whole car down. Like the car will not start at all. Sometimes they can't even get into the car. So basically, your CLA becomes sort of a static sculpture. That's going to be disastrous if there's an emergency. But again, this is incredibly rare. It probably won't happen to you, and it can be fixed by just doing a hard reset back at the dealership. And then aside from the electronic and infotainment issues, like any bloody car with gloss black plastic, this stuff can scratch if you look at it the wrong way. And if you're planning on actually using the car, it will look filthy in no time. This is why Albert has replaced a lot of the gloss black plastic with his sort of carbon fiber finish to stop it doing that. Also on some of the AMG models that have an Alcantara steering wheel, Alcantara loves to suck all the sweat and oils and hand creams out of your hands and just stick it to the steering wheel. So your steering wheel ends up looking like something out of a documentary about leprosy. Yuck. Although also on the update, they've gone to like a haptic feedback button instead of a physical button on the steering wheel, and plenty of owners are complaining about them. But look, back to positives with this interior. It looks so good. I don't know if the camera does it justice, but it just feels beautiful in here. It makes you feel special inside just sitting in it. Even the switchgear, everything you touch feels good. And then in terms of, what have I done? Hazard lights. Then in terms of spaces for all your crap, you've got good sized glove box there. There's a little net down here. Under here, you've got your wireless charging pad for your phone that goes in there. 2 cup holders, and they will hold a small pretentious coffee like a oat piccolo. Little storage cubby bin in here with more USB inputs. Door bins that are an okay size, but they're scratchy plastic, so if you put a hard bottle in there, they're going to rattle around. Nothing under there, nothing under the seats, no sunglasses holder. it's okay for practicality up front. Also, look, we simply don't have time to take you through all the features and equipment in these. Understandably, the higher up the food chain you go, the more stuff you're going to get. Also, if the original owner was enthusiastic with ticking option boxes, you're going to end up with loads of toys in here. However, even though there are more bells and whistles in these than you'll ever know what to do with, there are some things that you might expect to be included as standard fare that aren't, that are also included in cars costing way, way less than this in this category. Seriously, I'm going to call it out here. BMW, Audi, and Mercedes-Benz are just taking the piss when it comes to features and equipment that comes standard in their cars. And look, in terms of safety, look, it's a Mercedes-Benz. It's going to be about as safe as you could possibly expect a car to be in this particular category. However, don't go falling for the trap of paying too much for some of the most important safety features that you'll ever fit to any car, the wiper blades. Look, the OEMs often ask ridiculous prices for their wiper blades. Some of the aftermarket stuff is honestly utter shit. Instead, hit the Wipertech link below to get yourself 15% off and free express shipping on the only wiper blades we use. And they're so easy to order online and they're a breeze to fit. Go and get yourself some. The link's down there. Do it. Although in saying that, if you do what Albert has done with this car and lend us your car to feature, don't do any of that because we're going to give you a set for free as a thank you present. If you'd like to volunteer your car, email me. My link is down there. Now in the back seat, I'm exactly heaps taller than Mercedes Formula One driver Kimi Antonelli. This is in my driving position. And it's interesting back here. The seats themselves, very, very comfortable. Maybe a smidge too firm, but I think it's because very few people actually sit back here. But my head is cramped up against the roof here. The A35 hatch that this shares so much with has more headroom in the back. And also, look, yes, these AMG seats are wonderful when you're sitting in them, but the problem is, on the back, that's solid plastic. So when your knees smash up against it, it feels like you're going to require a knee reconstruction in no time. Also, there's not a lot of footroom back here. The transmission tunnel is sizable, so you wouldn't want to sit in the middle. It's not, honestly, it's not a great backseat area in terms of just accommodation. Also, it feels a bit claustrophobic because the windows are a bit small and all the roof lining is black and it all kind of swoops back towards you. So I feel like I'm being forced into the fetal position all the time. And then as far as features and practicality, in the back of this one, you have your own air vents. You've got a little storage cubby hole here and 2 USB-C ports. You've got bins in the doors, but if you've got legs, you can't get to them unless you like dislocate your wrist and break your forearm to get down there. You've got a pull down armrest here with a couple of cup holders, and these are adjustable, and I think they will hold a small pretentious coffee, which is great in the back. I think that's it for practicality back here. No other features, no, that's it. And then as far as practicality in the boot goes, superb. In fact, it has the biggest boot in its class, although the opening aperture isn't that large. The BMW is slightly bigger than this, but still so much room for activities back here. And the seats fold down. How handy is that? That is so much space. That's great. Now, before we get into what these are like to drive, got to ask you a favor. Of everybody that watches our videos, about 75% don't subscribe to ReDriven, and we'd love to get that number down because the more subscribers we have, the more free videos we can make for you. So why give that little subscribe button a little bit of a prod. But look, what is the driving experience in these like, especially this one being the full fat AMG? This is what these are all about. Surely it's all good news, right? Yeah, maybe not. First of all, no matter which variant you're looking at, in Australia, they all have a dual clutch transmission, and that means there are plenty of complaints about them just being clunky at low speeds, and especially when they're cold. Now, this isn't necessarily the car's fault because it's just a natural characteristic of dual clutch transmissions. And also, when the gearbox has these sorts of characteristics in a car like a CLA45 S, I feel like it sort of suits the vibe of the car. I like the fact that it feels like a race car just wanting to be let off the leash all the time. But if you're in the market for a CLA 200 or a 250, well, in that case, you probably are buying a car like that to have some sort of refined driving experience. And having a gearbox be all noisy and clunky all the time, it certainly detracts from that premium feel you're after. Now the next complaint, the road noise can be pretty intense in these cars. Now on the performance AMG models with performance tyres, this is just a trade-off, okay? Normal consumer tyres are probably going to be quieter, but if you want grip and performance, well, you're going to have to deal with some noise. But then on the lower spec models, well, they come standard with run flats, and those run flat tyres, yeah, they don't do anything for noise either, or even ride comfort. Now speaking of ride comfort, I've got to say, the ride quality in these is a massive, massive improvement over the previous generation AMG models. Those things now, after thousands of kilometers and years feel like they don't actually have any suspension. In this, in its comfiest setting, look, it's still very much on the firm side, but way more compliant, way easier to live with. And also, if you flick it into Sport mode or Sport Plus or any of the dynamic modes, the ride comfort is not there. Okay, on a racetrack it might make sense, but on Sydney roads, nah, way too harsh. But look, you know how this video might make you a little apprehensive in terms of buying one of these? Well, all of that is instantly forgotten the minute you flex your right foot. Jesus, bloody hell. God, it gets to 60 fast. Look, we all know these are very, very fast cars, but let me throw some numbers at you to put this chaos into perspective, okay? 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in 3.9 seconds. That's the same as a Porsche 997 GT2. Quarter mile time, 12.2 seconds. That's the same as a Lamborghini Gallardo Superleggera. And its Nürburgring lap time is 7 minutes and 45 seconds. That's 2 seconds faster than a Ferrari 599 GTB. Those cars are all renowned for their performance credentials, and yet here we are in a little turbocharged 4-cylinder sedan that will not only keep up with them, but can probably embarrass them most of the time. That is so impressive. Also, there's even more good news for a tiny fraction of the owners and buyers out there. This trick all-wheel drive system can send a load of power to the rear and outside wheel, so basically the car has a drift mode. I reckon that is going to be the least used function in this car ever. But then there's something that will impact all drivers pretty much all the time that no one seems to talk about, is what these are like to drive in real-world conditions. Well, yeah, it's really good. My only issue, and it's the same as we see in so many cars with this level of performance in this kind of category, is that when you're not up it for the rent, it just feels like another really nice Mercedes-Benz CLA. It doesn't feel overly special. Yes, you've got all the theatrics of the suspension and the exhaust and the sounds and the modes and all that. And if you select those, yeah, like it feels, you know, a bit more special, but even then it just sort of feels synthetic, like it's not really special all the time. Also, I'm just finding, because it's so incredibly capable, I'm just getting frustrated. I can't use any of the performance, like maybe 10 or 15% in the real world, and it's just, I'm getting really annoyed at it. But even though it can be frustrating to drive, it still does that Mercedes-Benz thing that they're all renowned for doing, which is it kind of builds this feeling of arrogance and entitlement inside you. That's maybe why so many baby boomers drive Mercedes-Benz, but I just constantly have this feeling that I'm just better than everyone else out there. Maybe that's what these are all about. And also, as the novelty of the driving experience starts to wear off, you start thinking about other concerns like mechanically and reliability. What goes wrong with them? Well, unfortunately, I can't talk about that because I'm not a qualified mechanic. But you know who is? It's Jim and Tonic.
Now I'm going to start with the 1.3, that's the CLA 200. Some of the problems you might see with that engine are turbo related. They have a comically small turbo working very hard, and it is prone to failure. They are prone to timing chain issues, but typically that's only when they have higher mileage or they have a very poor service history. And that poor service history also makes the oil consumption issues much worse. And of course, like a lot of engines these days, they have a plastic thermostat housing. The thermostat is prone to getting stuck open, and that makes the engine run cool, and you'll get a fault code telling you there. And also the housing itself, it is prone to leakage because, you know, after a bunch of heat cycles, it just turns to cheese basically. Yeah, that thermostat getting stuck open, we had one of those in the workshop this week actually. Now the 2-litre engine in this CLA 250 and the CLA45 AMG, they are basically the same engine. It's an M260. One has a slightly different tune. Don't get sucked into the whole AMG, it's a bespoke engine thing. It's simply not the case. These engines can suffer from timing chain rattle, especially when they're cold. Not so many timing chain failures, but they are prone to rattling. They do have some engine breather or PCV complications. Again, it's all plastic and it all falls apart over time, but yeah, that is an issue. And it will definitely be more of an issue as these age. Now, the big issue you might see with this engine is complications with the exhaust valves and the exhaust valve seats. Basically what happens there, they wear prematurely, and in some cases the exhaust valve seat can just fall out and catastrophically destroy the engine. And there are reports of this happening at as low as 15,000 kilometres. Now, how common is it? Look, Merc won't obviously give me the numbers, but it's common enough for them to extend the warranty. Now on that warranty is extended in areas like the US and Canada, but areas like some parts of Europe and Australia, we don't get the same extended warranty. So there's far less dealership and factory support should this problem happen. And a quick warning here, there is no way at all to know if and when it's going to happen. Less serious but more common problems, again, the plastic cooling systems. There's a lot of plastic bits, they all fatigue with age, and you will see a lot of leaks as they age. The engine mounts in these, they are pretty soft and they do wear prematurely. I've seen them go at 100,000 Ks, so keep an eye on them. Now the 2-litre turbo in the CLA45 AMG, that is the M139, that is the big boy. That one is, yeah, that is a bespoke motor. But that doesn't mean it's any good. In fact, it sort of works against it in some ways. Yes, they are incredibly powerful. They've got a closed deck and a twin scroll turbo and forged internals. Very powerful engine. But with all that power also comes reliability and servicing complications. They are known for some mechanical problems. They are known for breaking valve springs, and typically that just causes a misfire. You'll know it when that happens. The ignition coils, they fail. We've seen them go at 80,000 kilometers, which is pretty low by most standards. And there was a spark plug recall for the earlier models. They simply had the wrong spark plugs in there. So check that all the recalls are up to date. Also, what does that say about build quality if they're putting the wrong spark plugs in there? Doesn't seem very Mercedes, does it? These engines can also suffer from oil consumption too. The turbos in these are known for prematurely wearing, and sometimes the oil feed line can block up and that makes the turbo wear even quicker. They're making so much power, these turbos are working very hard, so you just have to service these every 5,000 kilometers. It's an absolute must. Similar sort of problems with the cooling system as the other engines, a lot of plastic parts, and there's a lot of, failure points, and it typically, as they age, even more so. And it's the same problem with the engine mounts in these. They are working pretty hard and they tend to fail. Another common failure point is the rear differential. Look, these are failing anywhere from 50,000 kilometers. Basically, they just wear out and the clutch packs and the bearings just fail. They make a horrible noise. Some of them are getting done under warranty, but keep in mind that warranty won't be there forever. And again, we're talking Mercedes parts, so Yeah, I know it seems like maybe extreme servicing a car every 5,000 Ks, but if this was a race car with this amount of horsepower, most owners would be servicing it every track day, which is, maybe 500 kilometers at the most. So yeah, service the bloody thing and it might just last.
And if you still want one of these after... What are you doing? And if you still want one of these after all of this, how much are you going to be looking at on the Aussie used market? At the bottom end of the range, say an early CLA 200, they kick off from around about $35,000. The most expensive CLA45 S we could find on the used market at the moment, is asking around about $130,000. But remember, we are talking about a used Mercedes-Benz here, so you really do need to consider depreciation. Across the CLA range, the 45S is the strongest in terms of retaining its value. However, the Audi RS3 tops it for depreciation. The equivalent BMW, the M235i, is easily the worst performer of this category when it comes to depreciation. And look, even though the M2 is probably a more direct alternative to a CLA 45S when talking performance, and it shows stronger levels of depreciation compared to the M235i, a two-door coupe is quite a different beast to a four-door sedan. But when it comes to the worst performers in the CLA range for depreciation, a 2020 CLA 250 can expect to lose about 30% of its value. The CLA 35 AMG, about 35%. Plus, add to that the premiums that Mercedes-Benz ask for maintenance and servicing. For example, guess how much Albert had to pay Mercedes for just a simple oil change? $800. Guess how much for a transmission fluid change? $1,300. Are you joking? And taking all of that into account, it can be a real challenge to make financial sense of buying a CLA at all, which is why when it comes to the lower spec models, yeah, we don't think you should. There are plenty of other cars for CLA 200 and 250 budgets that can all cost less to buy, but offer so much more cars for the money. Plus, they'll provide arguably better build quality, superior reliability, more affordable parts and maintenance costs, and stronger residuals. So check out the range-topping versions of the Honda Civic, Mazda 3 sedan, Hyundai i30 sedan, and the Kia K4. About the only advantage those lower grade CLAs offer over the competition I just mentioned is the brand and identity that comes with having this logo glued to the back of your car. But you're smarter than to fall for that kind of marketing and image bullshit, aren't you? Aren't you? But look, what about when it comes to the CLA 35 AMG? Do we recommend you buy one of those? No, you shouldn't buy one of those either. These are going to offer you the worst depreciation of the lot, the same long list of potential issues and expensive ownership costs, and even though it offers more performance than you'll ever need on a public road, it will always be the diet AMG of the range. And you'll know that, and let's be honest, deep down you're always going to want one of these instead. But when it comes to these, as tempting as they are, yeah, we'd still be extremely careful. See, the problem that the full-fat AMG has for prospective used buyers is that so many on the used market have been purchased on lease arrangements by owners that have no intention of keeping the car for the long term. This can often mean missed or delayed servicing and maintenance, and when a car is as brutally fast and highly strung as the CLA45 S, a poor ownership history can mean disaster for the second or third owners down the track. Do you want that to be you? No, I didn't think so. Look, if you can find an example that has been serviced ahead of schedule and has clearly been owned by, hopefully, a mature aged enthusiast, and if you're in a position to justify the ridiculous maintenance costs while absorbing the car's ever-increasing depreciation, yeah, buy one, because this thing is basically a practical supercar, and if you're into cars, you need to experience one of these. But if the car you're looking at and you don't fit that criteria, nah, don't buy one. Buy something more sensible, like either of these.
Now, a lot of people would tell you, and also the way Mercedes
outlast the original Mercedes-Benz stuff, outperform them. I've gone totally blank. Then there are the seats, which I've got to say are spectacular. I had to burp, I'm so sorry.
These engines can also suffer from I was going to say constipation again.